Robert's heart stopped as he turned over the photograph. The trembling words on the back read, "Her name was Emily. She didn't survive the deal." The tiger statue, once a symbol of pride, had been guarding more than a secret. It had been guarding a life lost. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Robert Thompson stood at the kitchen window, his hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, staring out into the garden. The tiger was still there, sitting on the cool grass, as though it had become part of the landscape itself. Its body, sleek and powerful, remained perfectly still, except for the occasional flick of its tail. The fading light from the setting sun bathed the statue and the real tiger in an eerie glow, casting long shadows that stretched across the garden. It looked almost as though the tiger was guarding the stone one, ensuring no one would disturb it. Robert's mind began to race. He had never been one to believe in superstitions, yet the strange behavior of the animal unsettled him. The garden had always been a place of comfort for the Thompsons, a sanctuary from the outside world, and this strange occurrence felt like an intrusion. What did the tiger want? What was it waiting for? It had to have a reason. Animals, he knew, didn't behave like this without a cause. His wife, Lisa, had noticed the tiger earlier too. She had tried to coax it away, offering scraps of food, but it hadn't budged. At first she had laughed it off, saying it was probably just lost, but the longer it stayed, the more unnerving it became. They both agreed to leave it be for the moment, but Robert couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something more than just a tiger roaming the yard. As the evening deepened into twilight, Robert walked out into the garden. His steps were slow, cautious, as though he were approaching a wild animal that might spring into action at any moment. The tiger didn't react to his presence. Its focus remained unbroken, its gaze still fixed on the stone figure of the tiger statue. He had the sudden, unsettling feeling that this tiger knew something he didn't, that it understood something about the statue that he was missing. He knelt down a few feet away and stared at the stone statue, as if hoping to find some clue that would explain the animal's strange behavior. It was just a statue, after all, a beautifully crafted likeness of a tiger, but it was still just stone. Or was it? The tiger's eyes gleamed in the fading light, almost as if they were alive. Robert shivered involuntarily. The wind rustled the leaves of the nearby trees, and for a moment he thought he heard something. Whispered voices, low and indistinct, carried on the breeze. He shook his head, dismissing the thought. It was just his mind playing tricks on him. Still, he couldn't escape the feeling that there was more to this than a mere coincidence. What did this tiger want with the statue? And why was it so determined to stay there, refusing to leave? His unease grew, twisting in his chest like a tightening knot. But it wasn't just the tiger that troubled him. It was the memory of his father's gift, the tiger statue that lingered in the back of his mind. His father, a man of secrets and shadows, had always been a figure Robert had struggled to understand. Why had he given them this particular statue? Why had it seemed so important to him? Robert had never asked his father, never thought to. But now, with the tiger watching, everything felt connected, like the past was coming back to demand an answer. Robert's breath caught in his throat as the box creaked open, revealing a collection of objects that seemed wholly out of place, as though time had suspended its judgment on them. Inside the small wooden chest, nestled in a bed of dried, brittle cloth, lay a tarnished medallion, a bundle of yellowed papers, and something wrapped in oilcloth, a dark, textured shape that sent a shiver crawling up his spine. He hesitated, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the items. He had not anticipated finding something so deliberate. These were not the forgotten remnants of a bygone era. No, this was something much more calculated. The medallion gleamed with an unsettling luster, its intricate design foreign and yet oddly familiar. Robert's heart beat faster, and he felt the urge to turn back, to leave it all untouched, but his curiosity chained him to the moment. He picked up the medallion first, its weight heavier than he had expected. The metal was cold to the touch, and as he studied it, he felt a faint pulse, subtle, almost imperceptible, as though the object were alive, responding to the warmth of his fingers. The design was strange, almost occult in its symmetry, and Robert's gut twisted uneasily. He could feel a connection to it, a kind of resonance that made no logical sense. He moved to the papers next. They were brittle, disintegrating almost under his touch. But Robert was careful, unrolling them slowly. The language was unfamiliar, the ink faded and smudged, but the symbols, those were unmistakable. His stomach churned as he recognized the same symbols etched into the base of the tiger statue. They were part of something larger, something dark, that his father had never mentioned. The final item, the oilcloth-wrapped bundle, seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. Robert's fingers itched, but the unease in his chest grew louder. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a stone carving, small but unmistakably lifelike, a miniature replica of the very statue guarding his garden. It was flawless, the craftsmanship so meticulous it seemed beyond human touch. But there was something more. Embedded in the eyes of the stone tiger were two tiny gemstones, glinting with a sinister gleam that seemed to reflect the fading light of the evening. Robert recoiled instinctively, a cold sweat breaking out across his brow. The weight of the objects in the box pressed on him, their significance pressing him into a state of dread that he couldn't escape. His father had kept these things hidden within the hollow of the statue, for a reason. But what was that reason? And why had it been left for Robert to find? The scent of decay, the faint pulse of the medallion, the symbols, the cursed feeling of the carved tiger. It was all too much. Something ancient and dark was tied to this statue, to his family, and Robert could no longer deny the creeping horror settling into the pit of his stomach. His father's mysteries were no longer just secrets of the past. They were something far worse, something alive, waiting, as though the statue had been merely a vessel, a barrier keeping something at bay. And now it was waking up. Robert's hands trembled as he held the journal, the ink on the final page seeming to blur before his eyes. His mind struggled to process what he had just read, the weight of his father's confession sinking deeper into his chest, suffocating him. The man he had admired, the man who had shaped his world with quiet authority, had been involved in a dangerous, hidden life, one that stretched far beyond the simple life he had known. Robert felt like he had been living in the shadow of a stranger, and now that shadow loomed larger than ever. The revelation was too much to bear, too much to absorb all at once. His father, a man who had always seemed just out of reach, had plunged into a world that was incomprehensible to Robert. He had always assumed the tiger statue was just an oddity, something his father had chosen for its imposing nature, a gift that had simply become part of their family's landscape. But now, in the wake of these dark secrets, it became clear that the statue was far more than a mere decoration. It was a sentinel, a silent protector of something far more valuable, far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Robert's eyes moved back to the tiger statue in the garden, the stone figure now appearing almost malevolent in the dimming light of evening. The way the tiger had sat so unyieldingly beside its stone counterpart, the way it had refused to leave no matter the disturbance, was it not just an animal, but a living extension of his father's will? His mind reeled as he began to understand the gravity of the warning his father had left in the journal. The tiger will guard what I've hidden. If anyone tries to take it, they'll pay the price. Robert couldn't shake the words. There was a chilling finality to them, an underlying threat that seemed to echo in his bones. What had his father hidden? And why did the tiger refuse to leave? Was it the presence of this unknown treasure that had drawn the tiger to the statue, or was it something deeper, something bound to the very soul of the statue itself? The tiger had become a physical manifestation of his father's darker dealings, a curse that, it seemed, would never be lifted. His father's journal entries spoke of fear, of something far beyond Robert's understanding, something so deeply entangled in the world his father had operated within that even the man himself seemed to have been caught in its snare. It was as if the tiger statue had been more than a protector. It had been a keeper of an ancient contract, something that tied his father's life to the things he had hidden. But why had his father kept it all from him? Was Robert not trusted? Or was he merely an unwilling participant in a twisted legacy? The photograph that had been hidden with the journal was unsettling. It depicted a younger version of Robert's father standing beside a group of men, their expressions dark and serious. All of them posed around the same tiger statue, this very one. In the photo, the statue seemed almost alive, its fierce gaze trained on the camera, as though it were watching the men, judging them. And the men, they didn't appear to be posing for a memory. They looked as though they were bound to the statue by something unseen, an invisible tether that held them all in place. Robert's chest tightened as the air seemed to grow thicker around him. His father's final words resonated louder in his mind. If anyone tries to take it, they'll pay the price. The price of what? He had a sinking feeling that the price was far steeper than he could ever repay. Something was waiting, something older than any of them, and now it had found its way to Robert. The tiger's eyes had always watched him, but now, with the knowledge of what it guarded, Robert could feel its presence looming over him, as if it were waiting for him to make a choice he didn't know if he was ready to make. Robert's fingers trembled as he gripped the photograph, the image searing into his mind with a clarity that felt almost supernatural. The girl, Emily, her small face twisted in terror, eyes wide, filled with an incomprehensible fear that reached out from the photo and dug its claws deep into his chest. How had he never seen it before? How had he failed to ask the right questions? His father had always been a man of few words, but this was a truth buried too deep, too carefully hidden. And now, staring at the image of that child, Robert felt the weight of it all, the horror, the guilt, the unbearable knowledge that his father had been part of something monstrous. The words scrawled on the back of the photograph were like a knife, sharp and unforgiving. Her name was Emily. She didn't survive the deal. The price we paid for what we took. Robert felt the blood drain from his face, his vision beginning to swim as he tried to piece together what it all meant. His father's cryptic dealings were always shrouded in shadow, always unspoken. He had thought it was simply the mysteries of a man trying to shield his family from his past. But this was no ordinary mistake, no simple secret. This was a life taken, traded, destroyed in the pursuit of something far darker, more damning than Robert could have ever imagined. The room felt cold, too cold. His hands shook as he placed the photo back down, the surface of the desk now slick with the moisture of his palms. He had to steady himself to make sense of what he had just read, but the truth clung to him, suffocating him in ways he couldn't describe. His father had made a deal, an impossible, unforgivable deal. And in the process, a child had died. The price for what? For wealth? For power? For secrets so sinister they required the sacrifice of innocence? Robert could barely breathe as the full gravity of the situation settled over him, crushing him under its weight. The tiger statue, an object he had always considered nothing more than a relic of his father's taste, had been guarding more than just a hollow space, more than just a memento of family pride. It had been guarding the stain of a broken promise, a secret too terrible to be confronted. The unyielding nature of the tiger, its fixed stare, the silent watch it had kept over his family, now seemed less like a symbol of strength and more like an eternal reminder of guilt. It had not been placed there to protect. It had been placed there to imprison, to hold captive the truth his father had buried so deep. And yet, despite all of his efforts to contain it, the truth had risen, uncorked by Robert's curiosity, and now there was no escaping it. The weight of that photo, the words on the back, was like a brand searing into Robert's soul. His father had not only sacrificed a life, but had forced an innocent to bear the consequences of a dark, unknowable pact. The girl's face, etched forever in his mind, would haunt him, a constant reminder that some sins could never be erased, no matter how far back in the past they were buried. Robert wanted to scream, to rail against the unfairness of it all, but his body remained still, frozen in the suffocating grip of the truth. This was the legacy his father had left him, a legacy of blood, of broken promises, of an innocence lost. And now that darkness was no longer hidden behind the walls of their home, no longer confined to the stone visage of the tiger statue. It was here, in his hands, in his heart, and there was no escaping it. The question now, as Robert stood in the stillness of the room, was not how to forget. It was how to live with what he had learned.